The drone holds station at roughly 40 meters altitude, its camera locked onto a shape half buried in the mud of a Ukrainian field. The shape is enormous, over 46 tons of steel, composite armor, and precision optics. The turret is cocked at an unnatural angle. Smoke stains run down the barrel. Somewhere near the exhaust grille, a secondary fire has already burnt itself cold. This is a T-90M Proryv, Russia's most advanced main battle tank in serial production, and based on what open-source analysts have documented, it is one of at least 155 of them to have been visually confirmed lost since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine began in February 2022. That number deserves a moment to land. According to the International Institute for Strategic Studies, the IISS, whose annual military balance report is among the most cited assessments of global force structure, Russia had approximately 67 T-90M tanks in active service on the day it launched that invasion. 67. The figure is reported by the Kyiv Independent and is specific. Active service, not stored hulls, not units in trials, not machines still on the factory floor. The tanks that were operational, crewed, and ready to fight. As of the 10th of June 2026, the Oryx open-source loss tracking database, which records only equipment losses confirmed by photograph or video, usually geolocated, documents 155 T-90M losses. That is not a figure from a warring government press office. It is a minimum built from individual pieces of physical evidence. 103 of those tanks are logged as destroyed, 16 as damaged, 26 as damaged and abandoned, 3 as simply abandoned, 7 as captured by Ukrainian forces. Each one of those entries exists because someone photographed or filmed the wreck or the capture, and a team of volunteers verified it. 155 confirmed losses against 67 tanks in active service when the war began. The ratio is approximately 2.3 to 1. Russia has verifiably lost more than twice the entire active T-90M fleet it fielded on the first day of fighting. In June 2023, speaking to TASS, Vladimir Putin called the T-90 the best tank in the world. Once it's in position, that's it. That quote, reported by Newsweek, has aged poorly. The numbers in Oryx's database do not care about presidential declarations. The recs do not lie. Today we are going to break down exactly what those numbers mean, how Oryx builds a loss count that can be trusted, how Russia's flagship tank ended up fielded faster than factories could replace it, what actually killed these machines on the battlefield, and what the T-90M story tells us about the broader arithmetic of modern armored warfare. To understand the headline figure, you first have to understand how Oryx counts. The methodology is austere, almost to the point of severity. Jakub Janowski, who founded and runs the database, and the analysts who contribute to it, maintain a single governing rule. A vehicle does not enter the database unless a photograph or video confirms its status, geolocated wherever possible. There are no estimates. There are no extrapolations from damage patterns. There are no intelligence assessments that cannot be tied to specific physical evidence. Oryx itself states clearly in its methodology notes that the amount of equipment destroyed is significantly higher than recorded here. The database is a floor, not a ceiling. The team knows that enormous numbers of vehicles are destroyed where no camera was present, or where footage never surfaced on social media. The count is not an approximation of reality. It is a verified lower bound on reality. This matters enormously for the T-90M story. When we say 155, we are saying, at minimum, 155. The true total is higher. We just do not know by how much. There is a second caveat built into the IISS 67 figure. That count covers active Russian service as of February 2022. It does not include tanks in deep storage, tanks undergoing factory refurbishment, or machines that rolled off the Uralvagonzavod production line in the weeks surrounding the invasion. Russia has always maintained substantial armored reserves, the legacy of a Soviet doctrine that preached quantity as a strategic virtue. The 67 figure tells us what was battle-ready. It does not tell us the total number of T-90Ms that have ever existed. The honest formulation, the one the facts support, is this. Russia is assessed to have had roughly 67 of these tanks in active service when the full-scale invasion began. It has since visually verifiably lost more than twice that many. The T-90M itself is worth examining in some detail, because Russia built a significant part of its armored modernization narrative around this machine. The Proryv, the name means breakthrough, entered service in 2020 as a deep modernization of a line stretching back through the T-90A and T-90S to the original T-90. The tank carries a new welded turret design, departing from the cast steel dome of earlier variants, and is fitted with relict explosive reactive armor, a third-generation system that Russia claims provides substantially better protection against tandem charge warheads than its predecessor Contact 5. The fire control system is genuinely modern by Russian standards. The Kalina suite incorporates a multi-channel gunner's sight with thermal imaging, a commander's independent panoramic sight, and a digital ballistic computer. The main armament is the 2A46 M5 125mm smoothbore gun, capable of firing the full range of ammunition including gun-launched anti-tank guided missiles. The engine, an upgraded V92S2F turbocharged diesel, develops approximately 1130 horsepower, considerably more than the power plants in older Soviet designs still filling Russian inventory. On paper, the T-90M is a serious combat vehicle. Russia's military communications treated it as a qualitative step forward, and for the threat environment the Soviet and early post-Soviet defense establishment imagined fighting in, the improvements were real. The problem is that the T-90M was designed in its core architecture before the era of the cheap first-person view drone. The Soviet autoloader at the heart of the T-90M's fire rate is also at the heart of its most catastrophic failure mode. The carousel stores up to 40 rounds of main gun ammunition in a rotating magazine positioned low in the hull and at the base of the turret ring. When ammunition in that carousel ignites, the results are not survivable. Sam Bendit, a researcher at the CNA Russia Studies program, described the dynamic to 1945. Any successful hit quickly ignites the ammo, causing a massive explosion, and the turret is literally blown off. The turret loss phenomenon, sometimes called the jack-in-the-box effect, is not unique to the T-90M. It is a structural feature of the autoloader geometry, documented repeatedly in footage from Ukraine across tank types. Martin J. Doherty, a weapons expert quoted by the Kiev Independent, offered a broader framing. The T-90's defenses were developed to counter traditional threats and are less effective against the new generation of top attack weapons. The relict armor is oriented principally toward defeating shaped charges from frontal and side angles, the attack geometry planners assumed would dominate a Cold War battlefield. The armor protecting the turret roof and engine deck is substantially thinner. Top attack is exactly how the modern battlefield tends to kill tanks. The documented mechanisms of T-90M losses fall across several categories. First-person view drone strikes constitute a significant and growing portion of the confirmed kills. Cheap one-way munitions, often costing a few $100s, diving onto the thinner upper surfaces of a machine that costs, by any reasonable estimate, millions of dollars to build. Anti-tank guided missiles, including javelins supplied by Western partners, attack from above in top attack mode, exploiting the same vulnerability. Direct fire engagements account for additional losses, and there is abandonment. Oryx logs 29 T-90Ms as either abandoned or damaged and abandoned, a pattern the Kiev Independent attributes partly to crew inexperience and poor command decisions under pressure. The single most widely documented individual T-90M engagement occurred in January 2024 near the settlement of Stepov on the approaches to Avdiivka in Donetsk Oblast. Drone footage published that month showed a Ukrainian M2A2 ODS SA Bradley infantry fighting vehicle belonging to the 47th Separate Mechanized Brigade and supplied by the United States, encountering a T-90M at close range. The war zone had armor experts analyze the footage, reporting the findings on the 18th of January 2024. The Bradley's gunner, working with a stabilized fire control system, methodically engaged the T-90M with its 25mm M242 Bushmaster autocannon. Experts told the war zone that the gunner deliberately worked over the tank's various sights and weapon systems, as well as some other penetrations on the turret and hull. The footage then showed the T-90M's turret beginning to spin out of control, the fire control linkages damaged, smoke discharges deploying, the crew abandoning the vehicle, the tank drifting into a tree. A Ukrainian FPV drone followed up to complete the kill. The experts credited the Bradley's stabilized optics and the cannon's rate of approximately 200 rounds per minute. The encounter was a microcosm of a broader asymmetry. The Bradley was not designed to kill main battle tanks. The fact that it could systematically defeat Russia's best in service illustrated how much the T-90M's designed-in weaknesses, the vulnerable optics, the unprotected rear hull surfaces, mattered in close-range modern combat. Russia did not officially acknowledge the engagement. Now for the production question, which is where the analysis becomes genuinely complicated and requires intellectual honesty about conflicting data. According to estimates derived from IISS assessments, as reported by the Kiev Independent, Russia's pre-invasion T-90M production rate ran at roughly 40 tanks per year. In response to wartime demand, that rate reportedly increased to somewhere in the range of 60 to 70 annually in 2023, with projections suggesting potentially over 90 per year by 2025. A March 2026 analysis by 1945 offered substantially higher figures, approximately 60 to 70 tanks in 2022, between 140 and 180 in 2023, potentially over 200, and by some claims over 300 in 2024, and roughly 250 in 2025, for a claimed total of between 540 and 630 T-90M equivalent tanks produced or upgraded since the invasion began. Those numbers are 2 to 3 times higher than the IISS-derived estimates, and their underlying sourcing is not transparent in the way the IISS methodology is. They should be treated as the high end of a genuinely uncertain range. What both sets of figures share is an acknowledgement, implicit or explicit, that wartime T-90M production is not simply a matter of manufacturing new hulls from raw steel. Analysts widely note that a substantial portion of what Russia counts as T-90M output consists of refurbishing and upgrading older T-90 and T-90A hulls from storage rather than building from scratch. A refurbished hull fitted with a new Proryv turret and fire control system may perform like a T-90M, but it represents a drawdown of existing stockpiles rather than a genuine addition to national industrial capacity. Russia's enormous Soviet-era tank reserves have served as a feedstock for this process. As those reserves shrink, the ability to maintain even the higher production and refurbishment rates becomes progressively more constrained. The honest summary of the production picture is this: estimates of wartime T-90M production vary widely, from roughly 60 to 90 tanks a year in cautious Western assessments, to claims of over 200 a year in more bullish analyses. Even at the higher rates, documented losses have repeatedly outpaced what the factories could replace during the war's most intense periods. At the milestone the Kiev Independent and Newsweek both covered, 100 documented T-90M losses crossed on the 16th of July 2024. Oryx's total Russian tank losses of all types stood at 3,235. By the compile date of this analysis, that total had reached 4,397, 3,300 logged as destroyed, 164 as damaged, 395 as abandoned, 538 as captured, 4,397 individual vehicles, each confirmed by a photograph or a video. For context within the T-90 family, Oryx also documents 46 T-90A losses, 2 T-90AK, and 11 T-90S. The T-90M alone, at 155 entries, accounts for the majority of all documented losses across the entire T-90 family of roughly 214 vehicles total. One figure warrants explicit caution. Ukraine's own general staff, according to Military reporting, claimed as of late, May 2025, that Russia had lost 10,864 tanks since the invasion began. That is a Ukrainian government figure, issued without per-vehicle visual confirmation, and it should be understood as Kiev's own count rather than an independently verified total. The gap between the Oryx floor and the general staff's figure actually illustrates Oryx's own point. The database is a minimum, but the two figures serve different analytical purposes. Oryx tells us what can be proved. The general staff figure tells us what Kiev claims. The 1945 analysis from March 2026 made a further claim requiring careful attribution that by early 2026, Russia had begun holding surviving T-90Ms back from the front line, placing them in reserve following a period of heavy losses. 14 T-90Ms documented in January 2026 alone, and 5 more in February. That claim comes from a single analytical outlet. It has not been confirmed by Oryx data, ISS assessments, or Western government statements in the material reviewed here. It is worth noting as one analysis's assessment, it cannot be stated as established fact. What can be stated with confidence is the trajectory. From 67 in active service in February 2022 through the 100 loss milestone in July 2024 to 155 visually confirmed losses by mid-2026, the T-90M count has continued to accumulate even as Russian production and refurbishment efforts attempted to compensate. The gap between pre-war inventory and confirmed losses has widened every year of the war. There is an OSINT methodological dimension to this story worth making explicit, because it is central to what this analysis does. Every number here exists because volunteers photograph and document evidence. The Oryx database is not produced by a government intelligence agency or generated by satellite surveillance. It is built entry by entry from footage that surfaces on social media, from photographs shared by soldiers, from drone videos published on Telegram channels, from images embedded in press reports. Analysts verify the material, cross-referencing vehicle markings, checking geolocation details against satellite imagery, comparing identifying features of specific vehicles against known types and locations. Each of the 155 T-90M entries represents a completed chain of evidence. Here is an image, here is where it was taken, here is the vehicle, here is its status. The discipline behind that process is what gives the number credibility, and the explicit acknowledgement that the database is a flaw, that it cannot count what was never photographed, is what gives it intellectual honesty. The broader significance of the T-90M story lies in what it demonstrates about the relationship between platform quality and battlefield attrition in contemporary high-intensity warfare. Russia built a public narrative around this tank, emphasizing its sophistication relative to older designs in its own inventory. The Proryv designation was chosen to signal a qualitative leap. Putin's June 2023 declaration that it was the best tank in the world was not an isolated statement. It reflected genuine institutional confidence in the platform. That confidence has collided with documented reality. The T-90M's improvements in fire control, reactive armor, and engine power address the specific threat environment of the late Cold War, a battlefield defined by large-scale engagements between conventional armored formations, where frontal protection and accurate long-range fire determined outcomes. The battlefield in Ukraine has not been that battlefield. It has been defined by first-person view drones costing a few $100s, top-attack anti-tank missiles, surveillance density that makes concealment extraordinarily difficult, and the accumulated weight of a years-long attrition campaign that does not reward a temporary technological advantage. The relict armor is better than Contact 5 against shaped charges from the front. It does not protect against a drone diving onto the turret roof. The carousel autoloader keeps the crew down to 3 and maintains a high rate of fire. It also places 40 rounds of propellant and explosive in the most vulnerable part of the tank. The Kalina fire control system gives the gunner excellent situational awareness in the engagement window for which the tank was designed. It does not prevent a javelin seeker from locking onto the vehicle's thermal signature from 2 kilometers away. None of this is to say the T-90M is a poor design on its own terms. It is the product of a coherent engineering philosophy. The problem is that the philosophy was built for a different war than the one being fought. The production arithmetic deserves a final pass, even accepting the higher estimates from 1945, which, to be clear, conflict with IISS-derived figures and should be held with appropriate uncertainty, even accepting the possibility that Russia has built or upgraded on the order of 500 to 600 T-90M equivalent tanks since February 2022. The documented loss of 155 represents a loss rate no military establishment plans for. These are not T-72Bs pulled from 40-year-old storage. They are not T-62S dragged out of mothballs. They are the tanks Russian planners designated as the qualitative core of their armored force. Each one represents a factory investment, a crew training investment, a logistics and maintenance investment. The 103 that Oryx logs as destroyed are gone. The 16 logged as damaged will require substantial repair before returning to service, if they return at all. The 29 logged as abandoned or damaged and abandoned, including 7 captured and turned over to Ukrainian forces for analysis, represent a particularly costly category. Machines lost not in the catastrophic instant of an ammunition detonation, but in the grinding accumulation of tactical failure, crew decisions made under impossible pressure, vehicles left behind when retreat became impossible. 7 T-90M captured, Russia's most advanced serial tank, in Ukrainian hands. The Oryx database continues to update. As of the compile date of this analysis, the count stands at 155. That number will almost certainly be higher by the time you are watching this. The database is a living document, updated as new evidence surfaces, and the war it tracks has not ended. What the number represents, at whatever point it stands, is not a final accounting. It is the current minimum of a documented fact that Russia's most capable serial production tank, the machine its president called the best in the world, has been verifiably lost in numbers exceeding twice the active fleet with which Russia entered this war. That is not an estimate. It is not a projection. It is a flaw, built from photographs and video, entry by entry, wreck by wreck, in a database maintained by volunteers who believe that documenting what can be documented is itself a form of accountability. 155 T-90M Proryv tanks, 67 in active service when it began. The math speaks for itself.